Hey guys, welcome back, and today we are going to discuss about the anatomy and physiology of brain. So we will see what is the function and what is the brain's anatomy. The brain is the complex organ that controls thought, memory, emotion, touch, motor skills, vision, breathing, temperature, hunger, and every process that regulates our body. Together, the brain and the spinal cord make up the central nerve system, or CNS. What is the function of brain? The brain sends and receives chemical electrical signals or simply messages throughout the body. Different signals control different processes and your brain interprets each. Some make you feel tired, also some make you feel pain. Some messages are kept within the brain while others are transmitted through the spine and across the body's network of nerves to distant extremities. It will happen with the help of billions of neurons or nerve cells. So, in conclusion, the brain sends and receives messages throughout the body. What is the brain made of? Weighing about 3 pounds, that is the weight of our brain in the average adult. And the brain is about 60% fat. The remaining 40% is a combination of water, protein, carbohydrates, and salts. The brain itself is not a muscle. It contains blood vessels, nerves, and including neurons and glial cells. So the weight is 3 pounds, 60% fat, 40% is the combination of water, protein, and carbohydrate. And the brain itself is not a muscle. It contains blood vessels, nerves. Now, now we will see what is gray matter and white matter. Gray matter and white matter are the two types of tissues present in the brain. Gray and white matter are two different regions of the central nervous system. Gray matter means the darker outer portion of the brain. Gray matter is the darker outer portion of the brain. White matter is the inner lighter portion of the brain. Okay, in brain, if it is like that, means it is just opposite in spinal cord. Inside you will see gray matter and outside you will see white matter. But gray is always dark, white is always light, thinner structure. Gray matter is primarily composed of neuronsomas or the round central cell bodies, and white matter is made of axons or the long stem that connects neurons together. Gray matter is primarily responsible for processing and interpreting information, and white matter is responsible for transmitting that information to other part of the nerve system. So gray matter will develop or process or interpret the information, and white matter transmit that information to other part of the body. Now we will see the layers of brain, same like heart. Okay, there are 3 layers for brain, and this whole covering is known as meninges. So what is the covering of brain? The covering of brain is known as meninges. This meninges has 3 layers. They are the outermost layer, dura mater, that is very thick and tough. That is very thick and tough. Okay, it includes 2 layers, posterior layer and meningeal layer. Second one is arachnoid matter. Arachnoid matter is thin and it is web-like structure consists of connective tissue. And below arachnoid matter, we have cerebrospinal fluid, that is the fluid which provide support protection to our brain. And inside, okay, we can see pia matter. Okay, it's a thin membrane and that hug the surface of the brain. That hug the surface of the brain, and the pia matter is rich with veins and arteries. So these are all the 3 layers of meninges. Meninges is the covering of our brain. Now we will see the parts of brain. So basically, there are 3 major parts for our brain. They are cerebrum, cerebellum, and brainstem. First, we will see what is cerebrum. Cerebrum is the front part of the brain, comprises of gray matter and white matter. So cerebrum is the major part and it is the front part of your brain. Okay, and it is the largest part of your brain. From the image you can understand this is the largest part of your brain. Cerebrum initiates and coordinates movements and regulates temperature. Other areas of the cerebrum enables speech, judgment, thinking capacity, reasoning, problem solving, emotions and learning. Also, it is responsible for vision, hearing, touch and other senses. So cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. So there is a covering for the cerebrum that is called cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex. Okay, and also this cerebrum is having 4 sections. Okay, cerebrum has 4 sections. Now we will see that 4 sections of cerebrum. First part is frontal lobe. Okay, frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe. So these are all the 4 parts of our cerebrum. Frontal lobe is the largest lobe of the brain located in the front of head. The frontal lobe is involved in personality characteristic, decision making, movement, and recognition of smell and speech ability. Second one is parietal lobe. Parietal lobe is the middle part of the brain, and that parietal lobe helps a person to identify subjects and understand relationship also. Then occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is the back part of the brain, okay, the back part of your cerebrum, and that involved with vision. Temporal lobe, that is the side of brain involved in short memory, speech, musical activities, understanding, etc. So there are 4 part for our cerebrum. Cerebrum is the largest part of our brain. And also I've told you there is a covering for our cerebrum, and that covering is known as cerebral cortex. It consists of both the gray matter and white matter. Okay, and this cerebral cortex is having some ridges and folds. So if you see the cerebral cortex, you can see some ridges and folds. Okay, and this ridges is known as gyri, and this foldings is known as sulci. Also, the cerebral cortex has 2 parts, or the 2 halves joins at the large deep sulcus, that is called, okay, interhemispheric fissure, or the medial longitudinal fissure that runs from the front of the head to back. So cerebral cortex is the covering of cerebrum, okay, and cortex is the outer gray matter covering of the cerebrum, and it comprises of half of the brain's weight. Cerebral cortex is divided into 2 halves known as hemispheres, and it contains, okay, or it is covered with ridges and folds. This ridges is known as gyri, and this fold is known as gyri. Okay, gyri and sulci. The right hemisphere controls the left side of the body, and the left half controls the right side of the body. And the 2 halves communicate through a large, okay, C-shaped structure of white matter and nerve pathways called corpus callosum. The 2 hemispheres communicated through a C-shaped structure, and that is called corpus callosum. Now we will see the second part of the brain, that is brainstem. So I've told you there are 3 major parts of our brain, okay, cerebrum, okay, brainstem and cerebellum. Okay, we had a discussion regarding cerebrum. Now we will see brainstem. Brainstem is known as the middle of brain, connects cerebrum with the spinal cord, or the main brain to the spinal cord. The brainstem include midbrain, pons and medulla. Midbrain is the very complex structure with range of different neuron clusters, neuron pathways and other structures. Midbrain. So that is the first part of the brainstem. Second part is, or the middle part is pons. Pons means bridge, that is a Latin word. Pons is the origin for 4 of the 12 cranial nerves, which enables range of activities such as tear production, chewing, blinking, focusing vision, balance, hearing, and facial expression. And this pons connects midbrain to medulla oblongata. Then medulla or medulla oblongata, that is the bottom of the brainstem. Bottom of the brainstem. Okay, and this connects this whole brain to spinal cord. Okay, here you can see the clear picture of the brainstem. So this is brainstem for your understanding again. So this is cerebrum, that is a major part. Then this is brainstem. Okay. So for this brainstem, 3 sections are there. Okay. So the 3 sections are, here you can see midbrain, pons and medulla. Here you can see midbrain, pons, medulla. Medulla connects the whole brain to spinal cord. Okay. And pons is the middle portion of this midbrain and medulla, and each part is having separate function. Next is cerebellum, that is the other part of brain. So among these three, this is the last part, and the cerebellum is known as little brain, and it is the fastest portion of the brain located at the back of head. So imagine this is the front, this is the middle connection, and this is the back of your head, and there you can see cerebellum. It has two hemisphere, that means two half or two equal half. Okay, the outer portion contains neurons, and the inner area communicates with the cerebral cortex. Its function is to coordinate voluntary muscle movements and to maintain posture, balance and equilibrium. So cerebellum maintain balance, okay, equilibrium, etc. Now we will see pituitary gland. That is another part of our brain, sometimes called as the master gland. The pituitary gland is a pea-sized structure found. It is a pea-sized structure. It is a pea-sized structure found deep in the brain behind the bridge of the nose. It regulating the flow of hormones from thyroid, adrenals, ovaries, and testicles. So it is known as master gland. So here you can see what it is controlling. So from this image you can understand it. Pituitary gland is controlling everything. Okay, it is a pea-sized gland present, okay, in the body, where you can see it is a pea-sized gland present or found deep in the brain behind the bridge of nose. In this image you can see it is present behind the bridge of nose, okay, inside the brain, okay, and it is controlling lot of things in the body, especially the hormonal secretions. Here you can see which hormones are controlled by pituitary gland. Okay. Now, next portion of brain is hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is located above the pituitary gland and sends its chemical message that controls its function. It regulates body's temperature, synchronizes sleep patterns, controls hunger, thirst, and also play a vital role in some aspects of memory and emotion. So near to pituitary gland, you can see hypothalamus. Okay. Next, other parts of brain include amygdala, hippocampus, and pineal gland. These three parts we can see near to pituitary gland and hypothalamus. Amygdala is a small almond-shaped structure. Okay, it is a small almond-shaped structure. It is a small almond-shaped structure, and it regulates emotion and memory. Hippocampus, it is a curved seahorse-shaped organ on underside of the temporal lobe. And pineal gland is located deep in the brain and attached by stalk to the top of the third ventricle. So what is ventricle? Ventricle is a cavity, and it produces cerebrospinal fluid. Now we will see what is ventricle in next slide. So basically when you study, you take a picture, okay, with parts of brain, okay, pictures with different parts of brain, and after that if you read this content means it will be very easy to memorize, and it will be very easy to understand. Now we will see what is ventricle. By the definition, ventricles are cavities located within the brain that contain cerebrospinal fluid. The ventricles functions to produce, circulate, and reabsorb cerebrospinal fluid throughout the brain and spinal cord of the central nerve system. The ventricle is present inside the brain. Okay, ventricle system comprises of 2 lateral ventricle, 1 third ventricle, 1 fourth ventricle, and that communicate with each other through interventricular foramina and cerebral abduct. So in this image you can see what is ventricle. It is the cavity present inside the brain, and it is responsible for production, reabsorption, and for everything. For CSF, ventricle is responsible, and it has different parts. There are 2 lateral ventricle, okay, 1 third ventricle and 4th ventricle, and this lateral ventricle and 3rd ventricle is connected by interventricular foramina, and 3rd ventricle and 4th ventricle is connected by cerebral aqueduct. So here you can see how the ventricle communication will happen. So lateral ventricle will pass the message to third ventricle will pass the message to fourth ventricle. So lateral ventricle will pass the message to third ventricle through interventricular phenomena. From the third ventricle through cerebral aqueduct, it will go to fourth ventricle. From the fourth ventricle, it will go to the canal of the spinal cord. Then, what is CSF or cerebrospinal fluid? The main function of the ventricular system is to produce, circulate, and reabsorb cerebrospinal fluid. And cerebrospinal fluid is a fluid and it is responsible for buoyancy, protection, chemical stability, and waste elimination to the brain. What is buoyancy? The CSF filled ventricle or cerebrospinal fluid filled ventricle and the surrounding cerebrospinal fluid in the subarachnoid space allow the brain to float and becomes buoyant, thereby reducing the weight of the brain in the cranium. Then, in terms of protection, cerebrospinal fluid acts as a cushion to lubricate and protect the brain and spinal cord. In terms of chemical stability, cerebrospinal fluid maintains a stable environment for the brain. And in terms of filtration or waste reabsorption or secretion, cerebrospinal fluid provides nutrients and removes metabolic waste from the central nerve system. CSF or cerebrospinal fluid is produced by specialized epidermal cells on the choroid plexus. Then what is choroid plexus? Choroid plexus is a projection of pia mater. You know what is pia mater? That is the inner layer of the brain. Choroid plexus contain a network of capillaries and the capillary plasma is filtered to produce CSF in the ventricle. Overall, choroid plexus assists the brain by providing cerebrospinal fluid or CSF fluid and providing CSF protection, nourishment, and waste removal. So CSF is produced by choroid plexus. Choroid plexus we can see, okay, the choroid plexus is a projection of pia mater. Choroid plexus contain a network of capillary. Choroid plexus is responsible for CSF production, protection, nourishment, and waste removal. Now we will see the characteristic features of cerebrospinal fluid. So, what is cerebrospinal fluid? It is a clear, colorless liquid that surrounds and protects the brain and spinal cord. It is a clear, colorless liquid, and it is present in cavities. What is the cavity name? Ventricles. CSF cushion the brain and spinal cord from injury, removes waste products, and transport nutrients to brain. And who is producing CSF? Choroid plexus. The choroid plexus tissue in the brain's ventricles produces CSF. Where choroid plexus we can see it is a projection of pia mater. The amount of CSF production is constant, but the amount of CSF secreted varies throughout the day. And cerebrospinal fluid analysis is also known as spinal fluid analysis, and it can help to diagnose conditions affecting the brain, spinal cord, and central nerve system. And a sample of CSF is used to measure substances like white blood cells, bacteria, and glucose. Now we will see the blood circulation in brain in general way. There are two sets of blood vessel supply and blood oxygen supply we can see in the brain. Okay, two sets of blood vessels supply blood and oxygen to the brain. So who is supplying oxygen and blood to brain? There are two types of arteries. They are vertebral arteries and carotid arteries. Vertebral arteries and carotid arteries. The external carotid artery extended up the sides of your neck and where you can feel your pulse. So if you touch in the neck, you can see your projections, right? So that is called external carotid artery. You can feel your pulse when you touch in the area with your fingerprint, if you touch in the neck. The internal carotid artery branch into the skulls and circulate blood to the front part of the brain. The vertebral arteries flows the spinal column into the skull, where they join together at the brainstem and form the basilar artery, which supplies blood to the rear portion of the brain. Then another part, that is circle of Williams. Circle of Willis is a loop of blood vessels near the bottom of the brain that connects major arteries and circulates blood from the front of the brain to the back and helps the arterial systems to communicate with one another. So circle of Willis is responsible for communication. So the blood circulation will take place by two arteries, carotid arteries and vertebral arteries. You can feel your external carotid arteries in the neck. Okay, but internal carotid artery are inside the skull. Vertebral arteries, that is also follow the spinal column. Circle of Willis means a loop of blood vessels present near the bottom of the brain and that connect the major arteries, and that is responsible for communication. Now we will see the last part, that is the outer covering of the brain, that is known as cranium, also known as skull. So when we touch, we can feel the skull, that is a bone. It also known as skull. Cranium is the part of the skull that protects the brain. So what is the function of cranium? It protects the brain, it supports the face, and it attaches the facial muscle. And this cranium made up of there are different bones like frontal bone, parietal bone, temporal bone, ethmoid bone, sphenoid bone, occipital bone, etc. What is the opening at the base of this cranium? The spinal cord connects to the brain at the opening at the base of the cranium. So cranium is the part of skull that protects the brain, and it is also known as skull. It protects the brain, it supports the face, and it attaches the facial muscle. And it consists of frontal bone, parietal bone, temporal bone, ethmoid bone, and sphenoid bone, and occipital bone. And we have 12 cranial nerves. So inside the cranium, okay, or the dome of the skull, there are 12 cranial nerves we can see. Okay, cranial nerve 1, that first allows the olfactory nerve. Okay, that is the first is the olfactory nerve, which allows you for your sense of smell. So first cranial nerve, the cranial nerve 1 is responsible for smell. Cranial nerve 2, that is optic nerve, governs eyesight. Cranial nerve 3, that is oculomotor nerve, controls pupils. Cranial nerve 4, that is tracheal nerve, okay, controls muscles. Cranial nerve 5, that is trigeminal nerves, is the largest and complex cranial nerve responsible for sensory and motor function. Cranial nerve 6, that is the abducens nerves, okay, that is innervates some of the muscles in the eye. Cranial nerve 7, that is facial nerve, support the face movement, taste. Cranial nerve 8, that is the vestibulocochlear nerve, facilitate balance and hearing. Cranial nerve 9, the glossopharyngeal nerves, allow taste, ear, throat movement. Cranial nerve 10, the vagus nerve, that's a very important nerve, allows sensation around the ear and digestive system and control the motor activity in the heart, throat, and digestive system. Cranial nerve 11, the accessory nerves, innervates specific muscles in the head, neck, and shoulder. Cranial nerve 12, the hypoglossal nerve, supplies motor activities to the tongue. The first 2 nerves originate in the cerebrum, and the remaining 10 cranial nerves emerging from the brainstem, which has 3 parts, as I said, midbrain, bones, and medulla. Okay, so this is the anatomy and physiology of brain in general way. So if we go into deep, there are a lot of things to study. So this is a brief description of the anatomy and the physiology of brain. Hope it is helpful, and next time we will see another topic. All right, guys, thank you.